All right, you guys, we'll start here. It is 6 p.m. Today's October 10th, 2017, Parks, Trails, Lakes Commission Workshop. We're going to start off with a call to order and a roll call. Jamie?
Jack McKenzie.
Here.
Tim Shinyon.
Here.
Jason Steenblock.
Here.
Jim Blake.
Here.
Kathy Schulte. Terry Steenblock.
Here.
And Jackie McNamara.
Actually, I believe Jackie McNamara is walking in right now. Perfect timing. Almost. There we go. Anyone for our open forum today?
We have
Does it
no one
look like
present
it?
for open forum.
Okay. Next, our regular agenda, it's the Fenway Park discussion. So if you can give us an update, Jamie?
Chair and members of the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission, this evening we are going to focus our workshop on Fenway Park and the operations for moving forward. City Administrator Aaron Parrish and I met with President Al Hauge of Forest Lake Area Athletic Association, along with their executive board, Tuesday, October 4th. In that meeting, we brought to the table discussion regarding some maintenance issues that arose this year at Fenway, particularly how Field 5 was lacking some treatments, and Forest Lake Area Baseball Association brought that to the city's attention. In that discussion, a couple options were presented as a starting point as we look for ways to move forward with this. Option 1 was described as continuing our partnership with the Forest Lake Area Athletic Association with allowing Blue Diamond to resume their mowing and field preparation, garbage, bathrooms, and then all of the tournament scheduling and games at Fenway. FLA would, in this option, contract with the turf management company for the turf management, so weed control, fertilization, and aeration. And the city will be working with a different contractor for irrigation and will no longer be working with Blue Diamond. In this meeting, it was noted that option 1 would pose some challenges with multiple contractors. So if the city has one contractor for irrigation, Blue Diamond doing the mowing, somebody else doing the fertilization and weed control. You have multiple groups and parties involved in that, so that can be complicated and some challenges with that option. The second option that was discussed would be the city continuing current partnership with and hold an agreement with FLA, but contract with one company to be determined that could do everything out at Fenway in regards to maintenance. So the mowing, weed control, aeration, chalking and prepping of fields, cleaning of bathrooms. So that was the second option. FLA would continue to schedule fields for their teams and would be involved in that regard. So our partnership would still remain. With that, it was noted that one key element with that option is that the scheduling components that FLA would continue to do is such an important part of when field maintenance can be done. So working together with FLA and our contractor to know when schedules are taking place and when there's tournaments so that people could schedule the mowing and fertilization and other activities out there regarding maintenance accordingly. So that was one of the challenges that we discussed for that option. After the options were presented, Forest Lake Area Athletic Association did state that option 1 is preferred and that they'd like to try to have Blue Diamond continue mowing and do the field prep scheduling for 1 year. They did state that they are going to form a maintenance committee within FLA, so one representative from each team would be a part of this maintenance committee to help better identify some issues or concerns and stay on top of the maintenance a little better. So per the City Council, the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission is given the task to come up with a recommendation for moving forward. Tonight kind of starts that discussion based on recent meetings and look to get some answers for moving forward by the end of this year. So tonight just want to bring it to the Parks, Trails, Lakes Commission in this workshop to discuss these options if there's any others that you'd see as a potential option for consideration. So with that, I'll turn it over to Parks, Trails, Lakes Commission for discussion.
All right. Thank you. Aaron or Dave, do you guys have any other comments on this issue before we discuss?
Chair, members, commission, certainly I think there's a lot of perspectives, on this whole issue, and, ultimately, it gets down to, where we as a community, as a city want to go, and, what the FLA executive committee that we met with, where they would like to see things go. We definitely discussed the idea of, the idea of the conflict, with the FLA chair and, being the owner of Blue Diamond and all that. So that was discussed. The group didn't necessarily seem averse to looking at like an option 2, where everything was under one umbrella, integrated better. But at the same time, they thought option 1 provided a good transition. I think as we talked about, our primary concern with that is just, people pointing in the different direction, as far as things not getting done, and, is it the irrigation's not working, the grass is getting cut too short, the weed control's not right, and if you got 3 people in each of those areas, some of that can happen, like kind of has happened now. But there was good acknowledgement of, the fact that things weren't where everybody wanted them to be. They kind of felt like they've got some internal dynamics that their groups didn't necessarily follow the right process on dealing with this. They kind of felt like internally, baseball should have gone through a little bit different of a mechanism than what they did. But at the end of the day, I think there's notable concerns. We are in the process of fixing the irrigation system right now. I think we have at least $10,000 worth of parts that we had to deal with there, and then plus our maintenance, our time, and whatever we end up ultimately contracting for on that. And so, fairly significant issues with the irrigation system. They did acknowledge that that probably got a little further away from them than what they would like to have seen. At the same time, that was a direct contract with the city. That's not a FLA item. That's a city and Blue Diamond item. I think it was acknowledged that things got away from them. We never said no if there was a request to do maintenance or things like that. So it's just one of those things where it isn't where it needs to be. It's a tough system. There are going to be some ongoing complications with that system. I think it'll be better once we get more active management of it. But it is a system that does take pond water, and so it's a little bit harder on the system than, let's say, our traditional city water might be on things, but not to the degree in which we're dealing with issues out there. So probably lack of irrigation is probably a key issue. And then the fertilization treatments, we did get information back from True Green. They had sort of felt that there was some aspersion being cast their way. They did email us and said we have done whatever we were contracted to do, and based on what they had communicated to us, that was the one treatment this year up until earlier in the year, and then the one that just recently happened. So that puts us at 2 treatments, for this year at this point. But based on their information, there was only 1 treatment provided in the previous year. So that's obviously not going to do the trick out there. And then similarly speaking, it doesn't sound like the infields have been aerated. The turf fields have, fields 1, 2, and 3. But the ball fields, in terms of whether it be infield and or outfields, it doesn't sound like there's been any active aeration happening out there. So a lot to do. I know the last time the park board talked, there was some mixed perspectives. Well, maybe not the last time I was here and he talked. There was some mixed perspectives on wanting to maintain the partnership with FLA versus we didn't have the confidence in the way it was being operated, and if we were going to maintain our partnership with FLA, we'd want to do so with a different operator. So I think that's really the question. I think we did try to lay out all the concerns as we saw them, similar to what we're doing here tonight, similar to what was outlined in the different reports that were provided, and that's where they're feeling they're at right now from a FLA perspective. I think some of the mechanisms they put in place have the potential to help with a more active fields committee, and communication, but we still have the potential for lack of coordination there too. So I just, want to do that. I know, Dave, you've been pretty hands-on too with the status of the system. And I know Dave gave some pretty pointed feedback when we met one-on-one with Al. And so I think the message has been delivered from that perspective, but just interested to hear your questions and what you guys have to say.
Wonderful. All right. Just to start, I do have one question for Jamie. At our last park meeting, we did make a motion that passed asking for certain documentation by the end of September. Can you explain what documentation we have received regarding insurance and budget and audit and different things like that? What we did receive, what we did not?
Yeah, Chair and members of the commission, we did put out the request for all books and records, proof of insurance, and we did receive back proof of the general liability insurance. It's in the amount of $1 million per occurrence. So it's a little short. Our agreement states 1.5 million per occurrence. We also did receive one other form of insurance in the coverage there, and we did receive just an updated profit loss budget report through end of September. Also included in the information was just a 2016 profit loss report that was just missing from our files. So that's the information we received. I know Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission was pretty interested in, part of the books and records. More information on kind of the breakdown of what maintenance takes place out at Fenway, what some of those maintenance costs are. Because all that we see is the total number for the Blue Diamond contracts and services. So we don't have any additional information of where that funding will come from or where that goes.
Okay. All right. I'll bring it to the floor here if we have questions.
One question also is, did the container get moved? Do we know?
As of Monday, yesterday, the container was still in its location.
Okay.
So since our last meeting, we did not get what we requested. We got a portion of what we requested. We asked for receipts, we asked for documentation, expenses, income, so we could actually get a paper trail going and have some understanding as to what the expenses are associated with Fenway Park. We learned that $10,000 worth of damage has been done to that system, of which Blue Diamond was responsible for directly as far as managing the operation of the system. They're the operators, correct?
The city
The
did
city
hold a...
doesn't program anything on the system.
Correct. The city did not do any of the
So
irrigation.
Blue Diamond is directly responsible for $10,000 worth of damage
So
to
far.
the system.
So with that amount of
So
damage,
far, that's in parts only.
I'm assuming that it didn't get blown out correctly, or not got blown out at all. To have that kind of damage, you'd have to have not blown it out right.
I was gonna bring you some stuff. John and Mike Swenson are the two out there, city employees that are doing all the repairs, and 95% of it's from frost or from freezing. Full water pipes of water, and it's all longitudinal cracks, heads that are, cracked. in half.
Why should the city pick all that up? I mean,
Well, I guess that's a discussion for a different time, but as of right now, we just have to get the
get it
system.
so you can actually blow it up correctly.
There's so many breaks in the system right now that if you went to try to winterize it, you couldn't force all the water out. There's just so many breaks.
I've dealt with that on golf courses before. I'm sorry you have to deal with that. Big project that didn't have to happen.
We're finding a lot of, just today again too, we found another about a 75-foot stretch that was just completely abandoned. That was, had probably multiple breaks in it, and they just went down to the tee and capped it off. So starting tomorrow, we have about 150 to 200 feet of trenching we have to do to install new lines.
Is the property currently being mowed?
My guys have been out there for 2 weeks and they haven't seen a mower.
Because it says here in option 1, Blue Diamond would resume the mowing. Field prep, garbage, bathrooms, they would resume it. Does that mean they were told to stop doing anything?
No, they haven't been told to stop doing anything other than Field 5, so the rest of the complex should be continuing to be mowed if it's part of their annual budget. or
And I know it's
annual.
really none of the city's business because it's FLA managing the property, whether it gets mowed or not, right? Or not?
That would fall in the management agreement as their responsibility for
Okay.
maintaining that.
Yeah, because the turf's about 6 inches long in spots.
Correct.
Well, a lot of spots.
But the agreement between the city and FLA is that it will be maintained. It's not at their option, is that it will be maintained. So you're kind of, we're saying the same thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, it hasn't been so.
Correct.
So therefore, the contract that we have with them has been broken. I mean,
Yeah.
multiple times to many dollars.
I see a great opportunity here to move forward. Personally, I don't care for either of those two options. I'd throw option 3 on there. The city takes over, or retakes over their own property. It's a $2.3 million investment. FLA rents from the city. We get some bids on the management of everything that's green and growing out there. I know there are costs associated with that, but there's also revenue associated with that. And looking at the profit loss paperwork, of which I can't figure out because it's not detailed enough, I don't know what the revenue is on those fields. I've heard figures $92,000 a year comes in from
That'd
FLA.
be incorrect. Yeah, I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but, maybe I can pull it up, but realistically, the revenue that's in place out there, it's complicated because you have maintenance and programming expenses integrated into their profit and loss statement, and so, you know, certain things, if we were just a renter, we wouldn't necessarily have to account for, like tournament expenses and there's some official expenses in there and things like that. Your bigger users, this is just really, you know, off the top of my head, but you've got football that pays approximately $14,000 per year. You've got baseball that pays $10,000 or $11,000 per year. I think Jamie has softball 7 or 8 or
I think 7 or 8, yeah.
7 or
right in
8,
that range.
you know, give or take. Those are your 3 larger groups, and then you have some other lacrosse. I don't recall lacrosse's number, but it's 5 to 7, let's say. And then you've got some other, you know, rental income when, you know, Leela plays soccer, or North Lakes rents for baseball, or high school rents for baseball, whatever the case is. So you have some miscellaneous field rental. And then they've got, you know, some like softball league rental, but they have a programming role in that, and so there's, you know, some blending that happens. And then it's supplemented with about $10,000 in FLA gambling funds. So, I don't know, Jamie, if you want to pull up the profit and loss, I mean, or that iteration of that, but that's that. Within that, though, you also have a situation where you can't necessarily count on the fact that what they pay FLA is what they'd pay us. I mean, we have hourly rental charges right now, and we just kind of tried to one day rough out what we thought that would be. And, you know, for example, football pays $14,400 right now, and they use it, I don't know, is it 8 Saturdays for the most part? There's no lights, so you can't have games during the week, and there's not a lot of practices that happen out there during the week. They have them going on at Southwest and other locations, Forest Lake Elementary and so on. That's the other dynamic that's entered into the equation is I'm not sure how it works with FLA and the way they distribute and allocate the school's field time, because their sports don't just exclusively play at Fenway. I mean, they play at lots of different locations, and they've got an arrangement with community ed where that's sort of built into some of this. So what I would say is look at the numbers for revenue in that projection. If you realize that, that'd be great, but I wouldn't come into you and represent that you're gonna see the same thing. You'd wanna plan for some fall off potentially, because it's like anything, a customer changes, management changes, they may or may not work with you, you know, and so it's a risk you're taking in the equation. There'll be some revenue there, but it's definitely not 90. I think you could, potentially see some fall off from the, I don't know, whatever 50-ish that might be there, so.
What kind of numbers did you get, Jamie, from people you talked to that were talking about doing it all?
We've just gotten some estimated numbers that fall very similar in the same range, so very comparable, I think, from what we're going off of here. We don't have a breakdown of how much is what the true maintenance dollars and that expenses out there, but I think in the $50,000 range, or that's just a guess based on some numbers we've been given, tentatively so far, maybe a little bit more, but I think it's going to be in that range. It's hard to know the true maintenance costs at Fenway right now because we don't have any additional information from what's been going on and what that breakdown is. So I don't know what they have budgeted for maintenance and if that's even the true maintenance cost, because maybe they didn't, they've done 1 or 2 fertilization applications and maybe not the total area they're supposed to and the certain, pounds of nitrogen per square foot. So with the limited information that we have, it's hard to know what the actual maintenance costs are at Fenway right now. And we're just in the process of starting to kind of talk a little bit to see what some of those costs might be.
If you're more inclined on option 2 or option 3, like, Jack had laid out, we have to get some bids, multiple bids, from people, and that'd be part of the discussion before you made the recommendation to the council. So, right now, we're trying to get a sense of, if option 1's off the table from your perspective, we don't need to chase option 1, right? But if option 2 is viable, option 3 is viable, then we can start to pull better information together on those.
Well, Dave, if you had everything up and running the way it should be and got it up to speed, is the money that they're showing, or even slightly less, would it be enough that you could handle it from the city standpoint? You'd have to add personnel, of course. So is that even an option, or are you guys not really interested in trying to pursue that?
It's always an option, it's just if we're properly staffed. I mean, if we would take on this project and you hurt other areas of public works, then it doesn't make any sense.
No, that's why I'm wondering if you could get the amount of money there. You've seen the property, I mean, is that, it seems like that should be, we just don't have any information because we've never received any of the stuff we've asked for as far as, how long, how many, obviously they're not mowing it every week, so we just don't know how much. But you might have an idea what it would take if you had to go run your crew out there and cut it every week. That's a big chunk of the cost.
Yeah, that'd be just dependent on, equipment that we had. I mean, we have a mower pending for next year's budget, which, is a 11-foot batwing mower, which could really shorten time out there. Plus, we have the progressive mowers that would work well on the soccer fields, 21 feet at a time, that you could go up and down on that relatively quick. So, I mean, it's definitely doable. I just wouldn't want to commit unless we were supported with staff on the back half, because, we're only funded right now in parks for 1 full-time person, and, which is 2,080 hours, and last year we put a little over 5,000 hours in parks. So, I mean, we're already stealing time from streets and utilities to try to get our parks up to, where we want to see them.
Currently, we have a lot of work contracted out, correct?
We have all the parks except for Lakeside contracted out, and that's about roughly 65,000 a year
Yeah.
for the 20 parks that are getting mowed by a contractor.
I know it's really not part of this discussion, but could we look in time to having a parks department within your department? I mean, we've really elevated the bar with our hockey rinks now, looking forward.
I mean,
Fenway Park.
definitely is gonna be a direction, depending on, the council and Parks, Lakes, and Trails. If that's, the only way to improve your park system and your trails is to either contract more work out or increase staff, and so I guess that's the crossroads we're at. Do we wanna continue to contract out, or do we wanna increase staff to do it within the city? I mean, and cities do it both ways. I mean, there's cities that'll contract everything out, and then there's cities that'll maintain the Fenway complex just like Fenway all by themselves, and, you know, they'll do everything, you know, so it's kind of depending on where the money is decided to be spent.
I would suggest if you're looking at a transition, whether it be option 2 or option 3, that it be done, option 3 be done in the context of bidding the work out as a package to a third party, at least for next year. Just so we can get a better sense of, you know, what we're looking at there and better, and timing and all that. You know, and then if we want to have this broader discussion, I think that's certainly a, you know, a valid discussion to have. It's just, I think we're at a point now where it might be best for us to, you know, at least understand what the contract option is. And some of these things aren't as, there's reasons why we moved to contract mowing. We used to do mowing in-house. We went to contract mowing, one, just because it was taking a lot of Public Works time up, you know, and it was a situation where, you know, we've got higher paid staff doing, you know, mowing work and things like that, especially on the front end of the seasons. And the front and end of the seasons is what killed us, because, you know, all of our seasonals would leave, and then, you know, we're trying to figure out, and falls, you know, can be busy. And so we opted out of that, because what was happening is the mowing was just getting pushed and not done, and especially like the boulevard mowing, we get a lot of complaints about that, and now we don't. We get limited to no complaints on park mowing at this point, but previously they were very significant. Now, I'd also say Dave has done a fantastic job of modernizing our Public Works Department, and as you can kind of see, he's tracking hours, he knows times, he knows where his people are resourced and they're doing, and, you know, he's not gonna take something on if he doesn't think he can do a good job of it. So, not inconceivable, but I think for just the transition here, might be nice to look at it that way.
I understand.
Jamie, did they, when you met with them, they said option 1 was their preferred option and they wanted to do it for a year? Did they have a plan after that 1 year time frame, or what was the conversation behind that?
That was the extent of the conversation that, you know, as this is brought to them, they said they'd like to continue to, there was a big tie with Flaw and Blue Diamond, and liking to give them that opportunity to move that forward. And I think that was, the 1 year was something they presented to us of like, let's give, you know, have that opportunity for at least 1 year and see how the improvements are, if we, you know, if there's no issues, and then continue on from there. So that was the extent of the conversation with that.
And then on this statement, the 72,000 that was on Blue Diamond mowing, fertilizer, weed control, did that include the True Green, the one True Green fertilization, or was it more than one?
So it looks like you're talking at the 2016 actual as
Yeah.
of
Yep.
October 31st
The
last year. That's where they
72,000.
came in, and I believe True Green said they did 2 fertilization treatments. And I believe, based on this information, that does include the fertilization, so that would be included there.
But we don't know that. That part of the
Yeah.
challenge we have is we just don't know entirely what that billing's like. I think it's, as we discussed that issue, how does Blue Diamond bill Fly? It's just kind of an every 2 weeks, here's a bill, but it's not necessarily
Itemized?
particularly detailed.
Okay.
For me personally, I kind of like option 2 and option 3 at the same time. My biggest thing for option 2, I think it would be easier for us just in the short time frame to possibly continue to have Flaw do the scheduling part of the park, knowing that with our other parks right now, such as Cooling Camp and Belts, if the field isn't being used, people can come in and use the fields, and I think we'll see a pretty strong drop in expected revenue that we would think that we would be receiving. I think if we were to take it over at this time. With option 2 though, one of the parts I'm kind of concerned about is if Forest Lake, or if we as a park commission just take over the income or have to pay the expenses for all the field maintenance, that's an extra $50,000 to $60,000 that we have never budgeted in our plans before. So I don't know if we can work with FLA in a way that we say we would like to continue to have our agreement. You do all of the scheduling of events and you kind of manage the schedules and everything. And we're gonna charge you $60,000 a year or whatever that number we decide should be, for the costs of the field prep. And we can charge, we can have them bill us a certain amount each month or, something like that. Has that option been given to FLA? Do we know if they might be interested in that yet?
Option 2 really is, we select a mutually agreeable contractor to do the work, and FLA retains programming. That's option 2, basically.
Is the expense of that contractor FLA's
Right.
cost or the city's?
FLA's cost.
I see. Okay.
So that's the distinction is option 1 is kind of this three vendor situation, but still at FLA's expense minus the irrigation city expense, which has always been the case. Option 2 is we have a kind of a prime contractor that we're dealing with and everything else falls under them. If they want to sub things out, great. But option 2 really is a contractor that would contract with FLA, but we would agree with. We'd have a say in and talk about and make sure they're scoped in a way that we all feel comfortable with. Option 3 is the city contracts with the vendor or does it with the city staff.
Okay.
Option 3, there will be a deficit that you have to account for.
Right.
I have a question about FLA. Is FLA Al? We talk about scheduling, we talk about all the activities associated with FLA. Who is under the FLA administration?
So when we met, we had a meeting, Dave, Jamie, and I with Al, just to say, hey, how are we doing here? And, we need to start thinking about this discussion and then check some things off of, have we done X, 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 and X, But we said, listen, there's concerns about the fact that you're Blue Diamond, you're the president of FLA, but he's been very hands-on. I mean, there is a contractual monetary component to this, and then there is a volunteer, community-oriented component to what's done there too. But we said we wanted to meet with the executive committee, which is their secretary, treasurer, vice president, et cetera. And so that's the group we met with and discussed these options. That group expressed the preference for option 1. Because we want to make sure we're dealing with not necessarily just the individual, but the board representing the organization. Now, their entire board is about 20 people. It's a large board. In addition to that group that we talked about and the gambling manager, they also have representatives from each of the sports, a couple maybe even. And so all the different sports that have fall under the FLA umbrella, which right now I'm just going to try my best here, but football, basketball, oh, there we go. Jamie's got it here. Hockey, volleyball, basketball, lacrosse. There's adult leagues, which is more predominantly adult softball, fast pitch, and then they do some other programming, baseball. And so each of those groups, they have their own. There's Forest Lake baseball, Forest Lake fast pitch, Forest Lake hockey, but they roll up into FLA for gambling and I think insurance and some other kind of organizational support. So it's a group of volunteers, that have done a lot of great things in Forest Lake. I think the intention was to do great things at Fenway. I just think it's kind of gotten away from us a little bit.
One that I want to.
I just asked because, who's financially, who's running the books? What happens if Al disappears?
They've got a vice president that would assume responsibility. Now,
Myra?
Al has been
Yeah.
the president of FLA for probably 30 years, a long time. It's not, it's been a while. And again, and involved in a lot of different things, Fenway Fields being one of those, but It is a community-based nonprofit that's focused on youth athletics.
And they've done a great job. And I'm not throwing dispersions or discredits towards what they've done for the athletics in the city. My concern is the parks, and in particular Fenway.
I was gonna mention, with our option two, I guess one of the concerns I have is, if FLA is the one who works directly with the, maintenance, company that does everything, I could see FLA after a while attempting to cut corners. We'll do the bathrooms this tournament, we can do the field prep this tournament, and I could kind of see some of those costs being reduced for them so that they could save costs, different things like that. A question for Dave, would you like to work with a company directly on the fields out there, or would you prefer to have that for FLA? I mean, would it take any more additional time for you?
Well, I think either direction we went, option 2 or option 3, I'd be taking on a much larger role out there. I mean, you know, and I explained this to Al too, you know, when I hire a contractor, when we contract out the parks, my goal is you hire a contractor that you should never have to talk to. I mean, they should do everything in their contract, DMPs, everything, and you should never get a phone call. And if I have to call you, it better get corrected pretty quick or you're out, you know, and, you know, I explained that to Al too. I said, you're lucky that I didn't sign this contract with you because our parks maintenance has a 48-hour out. And if they're not doing what I want them to do, they're gone. You know, so either way, if you go with an option 2 or an option 3, you know, I'm gonna be more involved in that where it's, you know, might not be daily, but at least weekly, you know, drives around the park to check the landscape, to check the length of the grass, you know, to do all that stuff, to check irrigation. I mean, irrigation, we're pretty much gonna, I mean, we have it at Lakeside Park. This is just a bigger system. We don't have the equipment to winterize. It's just a bigger compressor, but as far as after it's up and running, you know, we'll go out there monthly and run through all the zones, make sure everything's running. And I mean, you know, and partially, I think it's somewhat, yeah, I can take some of that blame too, is that I just assumed that everything was getting taken care of out there, you know, and I guess I assumed wrong, you know, and I just have to take that upon myself to, you know, do more and make sure everything is getting done out there and keep more of a watchful eye. So I think, to answer your question, option 2 or 3, would be involved regardless.
Did they talk at all about succession planning? So with option 1, if Al was to retire or win the lottery tomorrow, did they talk about succession planning of what would they do if Blue Diamond didn't exist, or if Al wasn't there? Do they have a plan or a strategy? Or
I think that's all more internal within FLA and their executive board. That part was not discussed at our meeting, kind of focused around maintenance. I think that would be internal within FLA to know if they've had that conversation and planning.
that's what I was wondering, not in reference to them as a board or a volunteer, but in reference to the maintenance. If, let's say, we get through this first year and Al decides he wants to move on to bigger and better things, or do they have any thought on what they would do if Blue Diamond didn't exist? Or
again, we didn't really go down that road of that discussion, but I think, being with the information we have, we don't know how much they're budgeting annually for maintenance out at Fenway. I think that, they would, instead of paying Blue Diamond for those services, it would be paying a different contractor. So I think, you would think that FLA would continue to exist if it's somebody else in the president role or using just a different maintenance company. I think that they would continue to flourish and be successful as an organization. They would just be paying a different or hiring a different contractor.
And with option 2, would the city then prescribe what the contractor would be responsible for, or would FLA do that? And would there be any checks and balances between the two?
It would have to be a situation where we consented to the contractor and the scope of that. And I think the working idea is that would be, selected on a mutual basis. And, of course, they've got to have a strong role here. I mean, they're the ones that are paying for it and all that. Option two, what you really get to is, and I think they've done a really good job of this, is programming the thing. I mean, you can't understate the time that goes into that in terms of scheduling and coordinating with all the different groups that are out there, and so that is not an easy task. It's not just it's a kind of almost a year-long type of thing where there's always something to be done as far as that's concerned. So they have done a nice job there, and in an option three scenario, you do have to think about. You just don't show up and mow and fertilize and do all that. It's, every time you have a tournament, you gotta be out there and you gotta be taking care of garbages, you gotta be taking care of chalking lines and field prep and dragging and all that kind of stuff that goes along with maintaining those ball fields. And a lot of that can be done with like seasonal work and things like that, but you just have to think about those three elements, day of, presence, and it's probably gotten to the level of activity at that field where it probably needs to be like Lakeside, right? Where we have some more consistent presence that's for overseeing and maintenance. And again, that all those things are going to contribute to what will likely be a deficit in option three that you have to fund. And it's not a bad thing. Communities don't operate these things at a profit almost all the time. I mean, there's very few of these facilities that operate on that basis, so it's not unusual. It's just what we have going on is probably a little more atypical than what you'd see in most communities, where you have a community organization running a facility that requires the amount of attention that this facility does.
So Aaron, all the scheduling and all that is done by volunteers?
Right, that's part of the Blue Diamond contract.
Oh, so they're paying Blue Diamond to schedule. They're compensating somebody to do all that work.
I think so. Is that your impression, Jamie?
I don't
or-
see it in the
Again,
contract, or the,
yeah, that's my impression, but probably a point that would need to be clarified, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that
Somebody-
if you look at the budget, and I can pull it up again in a minute here, but there is that $74,000 to Blue Diamond for the year does include scheduling, it includes getting sponsorship, so it does include some of those management pieces that FLA is doing. So I think that in our meeting, there are some paid positions within FLA, and that's included in the Blue Diamond contract.
That brings me concern, because if Blue Diamond has been doing the scheduling, how good a job are they doing there? I mean, agronomically, there are some deficiencies there. Management of scheduling, how do we know it's been good? I look at the calendar. I go online, look at the calendar, and I mean, it's empty. I don't know what has been done for the scheduling, and I can't see that on the profit loss. We don't know what we don't know. That's the challenge here.
So Jamie, option one would be pretty much status quo, what has been happening all along.
No,
correct?
option one would be Blue Diamond just doing the mowing.
Okay.
And the field prep, garbage and bathrooms. So
Other
the
than-
fertilization and basically the turf care,
Okay.
fertilization, aeration, weed control, overseeding, those kind of turf management, that would be done with a different contractor, one that specializes in that. So Pete Mogren's the one who's kind of done the field restoration on Field 5, which looks fantastic. That would be an example of option one. So part Blue Diamond, mowing and some of that, those other components, but Pete, for example, as an example, doing the turf management.
So you'd be looking at a total of 3, FLA for scheduling, Blue Diamond for cutting, and somebody else for additional maintenance.
And potentially somebody else for irrigation. So once it's up and running and repaired, and maybe the city or some other contractor. So 3 to 4 different parties involved in option 1. Jackie?
If we just consider we did option 1, we decided on that, how much of the expense the FLA is responsible for now is gonna come back to us?
Theoretically, it would be no additional cost to the city in that it'd be mutually agreeable on, these are the actual costs to do true, the fertilization plan that's really needed out there. That would be submitted as, here's the cost to do that, and that would be something FLA would budget for,
Oh, okay,
theoretically.
theoretically.
The only variable in there for us, and it continues to be the same case under the current condition or in option 1, is what's the variability with irrigation? You know, I mean, that's our responsibility out there, and, you know, obviously it's gonna be high this year. It's gonna be a
Right.
significant thing, but
But are we responsible for blowing it out? Because if we're responsible to replace all the heads, but somebody else doesn't blow it out, that gets to be a whole lot of extra work for Dave and his crew. So if we're not blowing it out, how can we be responsible, is I guess my question. 'Cause
well,
that's the-
we're responsible, under the FLA arrangement, we're responsible for hiring the irrigation contractor, which has happened to be Blue Diamond.
Which what?
Which was Blue Diamond.
Blue Diamond was the contractor to blow out the irrigation system?
Right?
That was a
Right.
separate contract with the city?
The city had a contract with Blue Diamond for irrigation.
It's been
So
that
you got
way.
paid for that too? Through the city?
That is what we've paid for consistently through the duration of this agreement.
But only billed as actual, and I think if you look back at the reports, I think there's been, based on what they've found as damages and repairs, I think there's been minimal work done, and I think from that meeting, you know, as Aaron had mentioned, it was expressed that it was, you know, it got away from them, and that it was a system, you know, residential is one situation, and commercial, and especially out at Fenway, is a different situation, so I think it, you know, it just got away from them, so we only billed as actual work. So I think that was probably minimal in retrospect compared to what we're dealing with now. So we only paid what we were invoiced for.
It's indefensible.
But still, if we were paid for the service and it wasn't done, and it's caused this damage, I mean, I think we have to deal with that issue also. And I certainly think that reflects on what decision we're gonna make.
Do any of us here like option 1, or do we want to exclude that from an option, going forward?
I like option 1 for the point of there being someone there that's going to be there for the games, that's also there to prep the fields and that kind of thing, that they're already there. So that part I like on option number 1.
As a flaw, because in option 2, it means a
would
different
be
company
done.
would have that
So
responsibility.
if we had another company, they would be there and make sure that the fields are right and the
While the
dirt is
tournament's
right
happening
and all that kind of
on
stuff.
an
Do
evening
they
or a
do that in
weekend.
between games or not?
So just, I can kind of interject here. I think tonight, if, you know, we can continue this discussion on option 1, 2, and a possible third that Jack had mentioned this evening. I think from here, if we're even considering option 2 or 3, we'd have to develop more of like an RFP, and that would be something included in a task that said contractor would need to complete. I know there are companies that do everything, including going out on nights or weekends to drag the fields and chalk them. They may just charge more of an hourly rate or per time per field that they drag it, but there are people that do that nights and weekends. So having an idea of when there's a tournament, you know, somebody could go out there and be staffed to do that. I know, you know, you also could look at a part-time seasonal or somebody that could be trained to do that or might have that experience, you know, part-time seasonal.
But do we
Staff.
need those numbers to be able to make a really informed decision on what option we're talking about?
We don't need the numbers for
Don't need
that.
the numbers, so we're picking options, but we don't know what the financial impact's gonna be.
I think we're just asking for preliminary direction here. So if option 1's not a thing, we're not gonna waste time chasing option 1. And from what I think I'm hearing, I don't think option 1's a thing. So we don't need to sit and spend a lot of time on option 1 if you can't see a path to using the current vendor on that side if the confidence isn't there. Now, option 2 might not be a thing either, because our partner very much is orientated toward option 1. So if you can't see a way to option 1, we're talking about basically option 3 with the city looking at getting a proposal to, provide the range of services, and could be 100% contracted, or it could be a blend of in-house versus contracted services.
I think personally, I think we need to try to figure out two different numbers of what it would, of what will the full maintenance cost, either if the cost goes to Blue Diamond or to FLA or to ourselves, what that exact, get some bids from different companies for that, including the cost of the field preparation for nights and weekends and for tournaments as listed in option 2. But then I guess, as Jack mentioned, for option 3, what would the cost be for us to take everything else in-house, the scheduling part of it? Because I believe that's the part,
Yeah.
that's the main difference between 2 and 3 with you, is the scheduling part of it.
But let FLA do what they do best, and right now, Tim, I don't know what they do best.
Right.
But we really need to figure that out. Are they really good at generating good community athletic vibes? Let's let them do it.
Right.
But they're not agronomists, and from the numbers, I don't know what they're good at.
Correct. And I don't know if we will ever get that information from them. But do you think that those are the two numbers that we're kind of looking at, or two different types of areas we're trying to get the financial?
Yeah, I might
understanding?
suggest, part of the difficulty with this conversation is, it's a little bit iterative, right? But, as we've talked internally, we want to get your feedback, because again, the partner is saying option 1's important to them, and so we wanted to have a check-in on that. But also, one of the things I think that'd be beneficial is just, us getting some bids on what option 2 looks like. And then from there, you can spin that off in a lot of different directions. It's not like you have to say yes to it. It's just, it gives you a sense of what the comprehensive third-party, maintenance and programming of the facility would cost. And then we can sort of maybe have some definition to, boy, if it's gonna cost $20,000 for the programming, maybe we can do it in-house for blank. I mean, we can start to do some of those, takeoffs from there. But I think that one number is, based on what we're hearing, and maybe a little bit of aversion to option 1 is, let's get the full scope bid and understood better. And I think that, until we have that, it's probably difficult to make a definitive decision, so.
Can you tell us again what was it about number 1 that was so important to them? Why did they want option 1?
Just passionate, a group of people about, what kind of service has been rendered historically, and I think, there's just a lot of appreciation for that, and so, I think there's a lot of emotion that kind of feeds into that for a lot of the good work that's been done there, and so I think that's where it's more emotionally orientated, I think, and I think it's, 2, I do think that group has a pretty strong connection to the idea of how much goes into the programming and juggling piece of balancing out all those different interests. It's, and it changes, the parent group, might be in for 3 years and then they're gone, 3 years and gone. There's a cycle to it, and there's been continuity for certain parts of that, though. So I think it's just more of that. I think the way the discussion has evolved, there was a little bit of, geez, be better if we could have, sort of worked through these things and communicated better. And, I think there's some of that in the equation as well. But we understand what you guys are saying too. And, we're just trying to be good intermediaries here, and, trying to find a path to something that we can all live with. Because at the last meeting, I heard from you too that you valued the relationship and partnership with FLA, and, there was some idea about how, is there a way to preserve that? And that's option one and option two.
And
So,
option 3, they'll still have input on option 3. We need flaw in the community.
I
But we
understand
don't-
that, just not, it's just more indirect there, for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a balance someplace in the middle, which is meeting the needs of this group and meeting their needs. And maybe comes down to the maintenance piece of it goes one way, and the scheduling and the coordination goes another way, at least for a year, to try it and see what happens for a year and how the scheduling works, and maybe us becoming a little bit more familiar with how that process works as well. And
I think part of it is communication, I mean, our Fenway Advisory Committee hasn't been super active, that's partially us, we have some role here too. There were some things that, we weren't taking care of that were kind of in our realm, and, I think we're gonna be more diligent about that. I also think, this field advisory committee that actually has the user groups involved, I think there's a little bit of disconnect between user groups and scheduling and maintenance, so, if we can get good stakeholder involvement that way, that's consistent, that has a potential to help things. So I think that, there's an acknowledgement that some of the communication pathways need to be better, and any solutions gotta improve in that area. So. But how about this? We will get you a bid or two, a couple bids on the full operation, and at least give you an understanding of what that involves. And in the meantime, just kind of try to, keep the conversation going with the idea that we really should have something in place for, come December, so we can really hit the ground running the right way in the spring, so.
in the
Aaron,
in- oh,
Go ahead,
go ahead.
please.
In the interim, can we address things like the insurance and the mowing, and if the things that are in the agreement that maybe aren't being met right now, could we, in the interim,
We can certainly reach out again.
if there's a requirement to have a certain amount of insurance and that's not being met, could we?
We can certainly do that again, and I know, the storage containers still hasn't been moved, and there, some of the other issues that we did present in end of August, still haven't been resolved, and I think, we can continue to ask, and I just don't know what that level of consequence would be when it's, not completed, so I can certainly have that conversation about insurance wasn't submitted, and tasks that still need to be completed while they're still in their contract with the city as it stands.
So just for my education, what happens, so last time there was a vote that if the container wasn't moved, I think the vote, was that
It was
it
the
would
city
be
would move
moved?
it. We've been given that they're still working on it. City staff just decided to let them continue to do that. So Public Works has already been pulled away quite a bit for the irrigation. So the city's kind of just agreed to let them get that moved. They're working on it, trying to get that logistically coordinated. But we just right now don't have this additional city staff with Public Works spending a lot of time out at Fenway right now to move that ourselves.
I don't think we
And-
have the
Equipment.
equipment to move that, so, when we talked to him about it, he has a vendor that he uses to move that thing around, and we offered a place for it at the airport, to kind of out of the way and all that, and, so the indication is that one was, there needs to be storage space out there for sure. It's just, how much and what's really in those things, it's unknown and probably education required, but one of them should be moved, and we were told that the vendor had been contacted and just hadn't got out to take care of it yet.
And then just one last clarification, you're gonna get bids on an option that looks at the city taking over everything, and then one that looks at, or some that looks at the option 2, where there's one contractor that does it all? What?
Just
can
the
you
one contractor that does it all is what we're getting bids on,
Or maintenance and the field prep.
everything.
Correct, yeah.
Everything,
Everything.
okay.
And scheduling then? Includes the scheduling part, or?
Not an option 2.
Okay, right. Just
In option
all
3,
of
I
it.
guess I can, speak on that a little bit. I think in my opinion is, FLA still does the scheduling. I did talk to, City of Burnsville. I just did a brief search. They have a similar, from a city's park and rec standpoint, they charge the fee schedule. So I just put up on your screen here. They work with their user groups. Schedules are due to the city at a certain date and time. There's a lot of forms and paperwork that they have. They just fill it out. If they're having a tournament, they submit it to the city, and then the user groups pay the city directly for field rental. So they have, obviously a camp non-local youth tournament, different criterion, but you can rent the field, you can do tournaments. They also do rent out hockey rinks and courts. So that's just their fee schedule. So basically, long story short, is the city of Burnsville, they get the schedules from the user group. So FLBA, baseball, submits it to the city. Softball submits it to the city. And I don't know that whole, in great depth, but they basically come together, put the schedule together, and then beyond that, anything that's available, the city of Burnsville can rent out, I believe, if somebody wants to use the parks outside of what's scheduled from FLA. So FLA would still get primary use. They would be priority of field reservations out at Fenway. They would just pay the city the fee to use that. So similar to like shelter reservations. If you pay the city, you're reserving it. Otherwise, it's available first come, first serve.
Previous communities I've worked in, we've had similar complexes, bigger than this even, and there's a lot of coordination involved in, that level of programming that's happening out there. So, yeah, you get a great master schedule, but stuff changes, weather changes. I mean, there's just
Yeah.
a innumerable number of things that require coordination, rescheduling, So,
They do have one dedicated staff, I believe, for kind of overseeing all the scheduling. Granted, they're a bigger community, but they do have staff specific for that. So that would be your option 3, which would, to Tim's point about the management.
The supplemental dollars associated with FLA, are those dollars kind of like their rental fee internally?
You're talking about the,
When we look at our
10,000.
at, other income,
that's gambling proceeds that supplements the deficit that they don't realize in revenue.
that says, okay. I guess I don't understand how we get to that $90,000 number there. And
I think what we'll
I
do
never
here,
will.
if option 1 seems to be off the table from the discussion tonight, I'll get an RFP moving forward with what it would cost for actual maintenance costs out at Fenway, and then we can look at exploring an option 3 as well.
One further question, Aaron, you suggested that we have further discussion on this. How do we do that? Can we do that via email? Can we get together? We can't do it out of this room, right?
Right.
So all we do is get to sit and think our own thoughts until we get together again.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you could have a subgroup, like we've gotten informal feedback, maybe the Fenway Advisory Committee members. We try to engage with them as we go through the discussion and, get maybe some pointers about scope on the, for what we're looking at for bids. But, I think we're getting to the point where we've got a pretty good sense of what that should be looking like. But that's another way. But otherwise, yeah, this is it.
What's not allowed so we don't do that?
Yeah, you just can't
Can I get a hold of 2
communicate.
people and talk about it?
You can get a hold of less than a quorum of people.
So you can get together with 2 others.
So there's
We'll
3 of
make
them.
3. 3 is
Three.
not a quorum. Right?
Just keep it to the same 3, though. You can't like
Okay.
go talk to, have a group of meeting with 3 and then another meeting with 3. You have to,
If we
And
pull
then 2
Jamie
from
into
here
it,
and 1 from there.
doesn't count.
That's
yeah.
bad.
we can't let Jamie come into it.
Yeah. You
Oh,
can
yeah?
be involved.
So there could be
I
3
don't
of us and talk to
I mean, the
Jamie.
easiest way to do it as a group, if you want to have some more day-to-day involvement with it, is to just say, these 2 people are going to provide feedback as we move along in the process. In between meetings and what have you. So that tends to be the best. And then
What do
ultimately,
you mean
though.
provide feedback?
Well, I don't know exactly what Jack's asking about here, but my guess is are we gonna do 4 fertilizations or 3? And I'm sure there's qualifications on that about soils and this and that and the other thing, but you gotta have something for people to bid off of, right? And so, is that kind of what you're
But we're
talking
only kind of
about?
pursuing one angle.
Yeah, I guess there's so much missing here. I don't know where the discussion would go with these three people. But it would generate more thought
I
than
think
what
the thing
can
about
on
it
by
is
my own.
you have to shift into the mode of, and you gotta forget about where you were and figure out where you're
Absolutely.
going, because that's where we're at right now. And I think you have to just pretend like you don't know anything and quit worrying about that, and then just say, this is what we have to do going forward to maintain the thing. So,
Yes.
I think we just set up the best practices in year one. Maybe we'll find out that we didn't need B and C, but we forgot about, D and E. So it's a little bit of work that way too. But
So Jack, if you want to work with me and we can figure out, if you want to have a little meeting, I know Jim's also on the Fenway Advisory Board meeting, and I know you guys have your background in this area, so if you want to work with me on getting an RFP on specifics of how many fertilizations and pounds of nitrogen per square.
Are those your issues?
Is that mostly what are you talking about with, I agree with Aaron, kind of, we don't know what we don't know, and I think we just present it moving forward as this is the plan moving forward.
I think this commission has a pretty good grasp on the agronomics because of the years of professionalism. I guess I'm more concerned about some of the other elements if we look at two, keeping FLA working with the planning and the scheduling, and I still don't know who does that and what they get paid.
And then that's part of the process. They have to, like in option one, even if you go back to option one, I mean, you're gonna have to get a bid for the turf management piece, you're gonna have to get a bid for the scheduling mowing piece, and you have to roll all that up, and not really different in option two, it's just one vendor, so.
So would the process be to issue the RFP, and then whoever's named to the RFP, then there would be a contract that would be put in place that would outline the more specific details of the requirements, similar to what you have in place, or no?
I mean, you can do an RFP, and that's a very structured way to do it. My thought is you get bids, and then
Okay.
you try to work with one vendor to get one bid, and then you look at it, and, if you're comfortable with the scope, and then you can get other bids based on that for comparability purposes, but RFP, yeah.
And I
Sometimes they
think-
provide some ideas in the bidding process that are helpful to you that you might not have thought of in an RFP. What happens sometimes with these RFPs is, unless you really are very, 10, 20 pages, or you have the exact agreement you want them to bid off of, can miss some stuff.
So summarizing, I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing. So can somebody summarize exactly where?
So I think tonight we've kind of agreed we want to pursue option two pretty heavily in what it would cost for one other company to do all of the maintenance out at Fenway. And so with that, we have a meeting next Tuesday. I feel like I would be able to get some numbers and potential bids to you by next Tuesday. And that will give us an idea of what we would be working with at actual costs out at Fenway for the maintenance, for everything out at Fenway. Additionally, which I think is going to be a little more challenging, is figuring out option three and what additional resources the city would need to do some of that scheduling and management components. So whether it's we charge a fee to user groups, so we charge FLA for field rentals, essentially. That piece might be a little more tricky, so I can't commit to knowing that number next week, but we can continue these conversations on ideas. But it will be getting bids is the next biggest step in this, to understand the actual maintenance costs, because we don't know what they've been, and that's okay. We're moving forward to understand, this is what the costs are out at Fenway. So I feel pretty confident by next Tuesday I'll have some numbers for you for review.
And those maintenance costs would be absorbed by FLA.
If it was an option two. So then we'd have to work with FLA and present this as an amendment to our agreement, stating that here's what do you think of this contract or situation? And as Aaron mentioned, it'd have to be mutually agreeable. At that point, FLA says, okay, we'll continue our agreement. We'll stay with option two. Or if something that doesn't work for them, then our agreement goes in a different direction. Our existing management agreement, if that makes sense.
So for us to make an informed decision, is there any way that we can get some kind of preliminary numbers of if we went to option 3, or even just for comparison purposes, from a structured company giving us a bid to do all the maintenance out there, what would it cost us for the city to do it? I think we need those numbers to compare.
I think we can, and I'll try to by next Tuesday, because I'd have to have it by this Friday would be my deadline to have that number.
So you
for the
have to
packet.
understand, there isn't a lot of difference between option 2 and 3. I mean, realistically, the only difference is the city incurs the expense in option 3 and may or may not realize the same kind of revenue that is currently realized the way it's operated today. You can get a bid for option 2 and have a very good sense of all the maintenance that needs to happen out there. And it sounds like even, field prep and all that. I mean, the only thing then really left is potentially is scheduling. And then that's just a takeoff of city staff and how we're gonna figure that out. And we can do that pretty easily.
So even in option 3, you're going to sub out all the field maintenance.
I believe so. I mean, and then if you wanna look at an absolute in-house option, we can potentially go down that road. I'm not gonna say the city council is gonna be interested in that. My impression would be is that they would prefer a contracted option for option 3, at least for this transition period of time. So I always like to focus my time on things that I feel like, are likely, responsive to what people are thinking. So I think we get that comprehensive maintenance bid. You have a good sense of where option 2 might take you. And then you have an ability to sort of step out and project what option 3 might look like if you don't have a partner anymore.
I think if you got a different contractor and if that's the option you go, or if you stuck with Blue Diamond, you would require a very detailed maintenance schedule of what happened throughout the year. That would give us a very good idea of what it would cost us internally. If you knew that, okay, the complex was mowed 24 times, the fields, there was X amount of games that went on, so, dragging happened X amount of times per week, and if you had it detailed out, you could dial it in pretty tight to what it would actually cost you internally, probably down to the hour.
And we won't know that till we go through a year of contracted.
You won't, and
Yeah.
I really think that cost that flaw is showing, that 70 grand is, you're gonna find bids that are gonna come in at that and blow it. I don't think that you're gonna find a different contractor that's gonna be above that for what they do out there. So I really don't fear a higher price coming in, but I can't wrap my head around what actually is done out there because it's just a number, and I'm more of with just going back to my contract park mowing, I could send him an email and say, give me the dates and the times that you mowed all the parks this year, and within a couple hours, he'll email me everything. That's the requirement of him. And that's what you just put in this maintenance contract going forward. I wanna know June 1st through the 8th that week, how many times did you mow? How many fields did you drag? Whatever. You break it down to everything, and then you have that information then going forward. And then you can choose, no, there's no way in heck the city can do that for what we're contracting out for, or, okay, yeah, that's doable. We, in-house, we could probably do that for the same price. But until you have that, you'd just be going blind. So, I agree with Darren that you almost need to go another year with however way you wanna go with that, but just require more of a detailed invoicing, or description of what's being done out there.
One question I have is a little bit off, but is there any equipment that the City of Parks, Lakes Commission has purchased that's out there? In
Not
the,
right now, I think it's all Blue Diamond equipment.
All Blue Diamond equipment, okay.
Yeah, there's lots more to this too, right? Like, operation of the concession stand is an example. It's a city building, but, they operate that generally to the benefit of, the user groups that are out there that, you know, have the opportunity to do some fundraising for their sports and things like that. It's more of a convenience type of thing. I don't know how much money, I don't think it really generates a lot of money as far as if you had to pay people to go out there and operate it and all that. I don't think the volume's there for that, but it is a situation where, you know, it's a nice mechanism for that. And there are certain, in an in-house situation, or even if a contractor is gonna come and, you know, do that, there are probably some equipment needs that you'd need to think about on the front end as you transition in terms of just, you know, what you need to direct ball fields and that kind of stuff, so.
Any other questions or discussion on this topic for tonight? I think they kind of have an idea of what they're gonna be trying to gather for us next, and we'll continue to move forward, so. All right, thanks, you guys. Yes, thank you. Next on our agenda will be the park priority review. Jamie?
All right, so Chair and members of the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission, just wanted to, since we had you together tonight, kind of review our park priority list, talk about some of the things we've done, and just kind of regroup on some of the next things on the list, so we can keep them moving forward. This is just a discussion item tonight, and just an opportunity to refocus on the next things on the list. So obviously on here, we, because of the opportunity we had out at Fenway for the new outdoor pickleball courts, that has been completed. It's been heavily used, had a tournament there this past Sunday, and brought in, over 50 people participated in the tournament that was run by Minnesota Recreation and Park Association, and they were really impressed with the courts. They thought the quality was really great. So the pickleball people, I've learned, travel, and they'll continue to go places that they've enjoyed. So I think that was a big success there with that opportunity. We've also kind of, because of the opportunity with outdoor hockey rinks, we've made that purchase for $5,000, and that new set of rinks is currently being installed. It's probably about halfway. I know Tim sees it pretty much daily, but it's looking really great. We've had Forest Lake hockey associations address the city on interested in potentially reserving that hockey rink for mites practices. So there could be a revenue opportunity there. So something we'll need to think about. So 2B's off the list. And then, so with that being said, I know we've made some progress on 1B, well, it should be 1C, the established fall protection at parks. We did make a motion, and moving forward as needed, we will purchase the recycled engineered wood fiber moving forward. So we've made some progress there. We haven't had any parks that have we've removed the rubber mulch to a different park. So the next thing on the list is the playground replacement at Lakeside Memorial Park. So just wanted to refresh everyone's memory on that, so we can get some traction on this. The current playground equipment there has shifted due to the proximity to the lake. So our decision on this will need to be, do we remove it and just repair it and put it back? Or do we want to consider some new playground equipment there at Lakeside Memorial Park? Either way, it does need to be removed to address the issue with the ground that has shifted. So that is one of the items that, for discussion. And then also 2A, Belts Park redevelopment. We did have a presentation from the PAC group from the Forest Lake Area High School, and they want to be, continue. They presented a preliminary opportunity plan for Belts Park with a lot of great ideas. They want to continue to be involved in that process, and we haven't moved anything forward in that, so want to keep that in mind. And additionally, the parking lot at Cedar Park has been discussed with Public Works, and that is in the plans to do in the near future. It's going to be coordinated along with another project in the city so we can save on costs and do two projects at once. So I think before we go any further on the list, those are just some of the items. I guess 2G, the bike share program, is something that I'm working on with Health Up and need to revisit that agreement. Health Up and the city would like to see that implemented for 2018. So we need to get that going as well. So just a discussion tonight. If anyone has any feedback, I know we have a little subcommittee and we also haven't met very often. But really want to start planning out our next improvements and looking just for any comments or feedback on some of the projects and make sure we stay in line with our priorities here. So with that, if you have any comments or questions or anything to talk about with park improvements, moving forward.
I have a question. As far as our budget goes, or do we have any funds in the budget at this point that if we don't spend them by the end of the year, they're lost?
We do, and I don't have the exact number, but just because of the recent irrigation costs that we've incurred, and I know David said that if we still go over, that was kind of a unique situation that wasn't planned for, because that is about $10,000 in parts. I believe otherwise it was looking at about $25,000 if you don't take into account that $10,000. And I'll have that budget report for next Thursday, and I can pull it up here really quick. So I would say about $25,000.
Yeah. Can you give us an update on where we are on that Cedar Park Pavilion as well?
The installation finally, the city was gonna consider doing the install. So the city's done some of the prep work to get it installed. We are using a contractor to do the work, the assembly of it. And it was supposed to be this week, but it got pushed back because of the rain. So in the very near future, week or so, 2 at the most, I'm thinking. So that will be available for rentals next season.
And then is it the swing set that needs to be addressed at Lakeside? That's
The
playground set?
Yes.
So is that, could we use the money that was from the Lions Club towards that?
We definitely can. A playground equipment is expensive. If we were to get a full playground equipment piece, it's right around $75,000.
Or more.
Or more,
Definitely,
yeah.
or more. So I think, do we want to spend $100,000 or more for new equipment at Lakeside Memorial Park? Or do we want to, obviously it's going to be less to have it just removed and repaired and fix the parts that we need to fix. It's obviously going to be significantly less where do we want to focus our dollars? Just make it so it's improved and redo the resurfacing that's needed to be done and spend a lot less? Or do we want to, is it time for some new equipment there? It's been there about 12 years, I believe, was put in. So just some of those kind of initial thoughts.
And kind of the unfortunate part is it's actually one of our newer parks compared to some of the other parks with equipment like Cooling Camp and stuff like that. Those are almost 20 years old.
So
Some
with
of them are, so.
with that one option, they can remove it and relocate it. The company can do that. So, would it be better somewhere else? And because Lakeside's used probably the most out of all the parks other than Fenway. So that's just for discussion or thought.
What would stop the new piece from shifting and being the same issue?
From my understanding from the contractors that I've met out there, they said that when it was installed, it wasn't installed properly. They didn't put enough cement or the depths that were needed, so that's why it shifted.
So if we did it and redid it, they would do it right? They'd take this out, put in the right footings, put this back.
Yeah, they would do it properly, and they were surprised at how it was installed. It was under different ownership several years ago when it was installed. And that I don't believe is in, I pulled up their warranty, but it's not part of the warranty. Some of the poles, if they would be damaged in removing it, some of the poles would potentially be under warranty. But that would be about it from my conversation with them.
Perfect.
We're just talking about the swings, right?
No, the actual,
Place.
right by the
big
lake.
place. I thought we
Yeah.
were talking
So
about
if you
the
go
swings
and
are-
actually stand on it,
swings
it's
are
nothing that, it's a low level hazard or, it's still deemed safe. It's just the platforms are slanted and the bars are a little uneven. And it's gonna continue to only get worse as, time goes on, but it definitely needs to be addressed.
And then on the Cedar Park, is that going to be a gravel parking lot? Is that the idea? Or is that gonna be,
I will have to, Dave is in charge of that maintenance project, and I don't know the specifications, but I believe they're gonna do, like a concrete slab or asphalt.
that's,
So I can get that information for you on the plan, but he has it in his notes, and he knows that that's coming up next time they do a project in that area.
Perfect. All right, so.
Jamie, do any of the parks have wheelchair accessible equipment? Or,
I don't think we have an inclusive park at the time, and we had some preliminary discussions about that last year around this time for Lakeside Memorial, or developing an inclusive park. Has been something we've briefly talked about. And I'm gonna let you guys talk amongst yourself. I'm gonna run and grab some water really quick, so I'll be back.
A question I have for commission members, have you guys looked at Southview Park yet? That's the one that's tucked way behind McCullough's right now. I still think that equipment's in really rough shape. That equipment's been there for almost 20 years now. The foundation's broken, it's sand, the concrete's all broken apart. It looks like if you jumped on it hard enough, it could fall over, probably. I'm wondering if we're interested in removing that park. A year or two ago, I went to some of the neighbors who were outside and said, "Do you ever go to this park back here?" And it's so tucked away behind in the woods, pretty much, that some of the neighbors didn't even know the playground was back there, or the purpose of it being back there. And I'm wondering if that's a park that we want to eliminate and, kind of let it return to a natural area a little bit and go from there. So
Is that one we can do that with?
we can't sell the land, I don't think,
But we can just take out the equipment.
we can take the equipment out and
Yeah. That
let
seems
that go.
reasonable.
Jamie, if possible, can you pull up a map of where Southview is? Southview Park, behind McCullough's.
If we can't sell that land, can we develop some sort of covenants with the Rice Creek Watershed District? Because that land could be very important to them as they develop further to the south and east.
Mhm.
And
For sure.
maybe claim a larger property or something from them.
Yep. And it might even be a great opportunity to build a trail system from Goodview to 61 in the future too. You have a trail system opportunity there because it reaches both sides. So it reaches both roadways for the most part.
I would agree with you, that equipment should probably be removed just for safety
For
issues.
safety issues, for sure.
I would agree with that also.
That's fine.
So how do we go about doing that then?
I'm pulling that up in just a
Probably have to
minute.
make a motion of that. at
So,
our
and
next
even,
meeting.
so being that we have a meeting next Tuesday, if there's anything, we don't have to go through everything tonight, but if there are any other like checklist items that you'd like to see done yet this fall before as we're starting to winterize parks next week, starting on the 16th, if there's anything else, maybe we can just think of those over the next few days and email me those items, similar to what Tim is talking about, of just things that we'd like to see done. And if we want to on Tuesday, we can review a list and make a motion or approve anything if needed at that meeting.
Jamie, do we have any property that is under our commission that isn't really considered parks property? I thought when we looked at a map last spring, there's a piece on Shields Lake that showed up as our property, but we didn't know it was our property.
I think there might be one piece that our zoning administrator identified that might be a park land that I can get more information from him on what parcel that would be.
Just one?
The dock.
I believe there was one.
Their dock on Shields Lake.
shore.
Oh, on the south shore. Okay.
There's a few other spots
Yeah, I
in
think
Forest
there's
Lake
a
as
few
well. I
spots.
know there's one on North Shore as well, by North Shore and 97 area, that area around there.
But this
Yeah,
doesn't
there's
have a
a few.
sign, it's just
Correct,
a vacant lot that's shaded in as
correct.
ours,
Yes,
community speak.
communities, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe we need a new map and list. to keep us, so we all talk
And
about
all
the same
that
places.
equipment is completely bad at,
That what comes in
I
handy.
believe so, yes.
okay.
Yeah, so you can see, this is South View Park here on our map. The only way you can access it is through Georgia Avenue here, and you have to walk down that path to get to the back lot, way back here.
I'll zoom in a little bit. So yeah, you pretty much just park right in this area, and then you walk back, and the shelter's in, poor it's in poor condition, and then here's the equipment, and this is a little toddler piece.
So is this all park where these paths are back here?
Yes, correct, yep, the entire area is pretty much all parkland right here, right behind the houses to from where McCullough's mini
Goes all the
storage is.
way.
All the way, if you go north even a little bit more, it even follows right into 97. This entire area between Georgia and Georgia and 61 is all park area as well, according to Washington County GIS.
But it's wetland.
It is wetland,
Yeah.
yes. But, so that's something I guess we can consider next week, Tuesday. I've gone to that park a few times and it doesn't get better.
No, and I think it's,
None of those people use it.
fair to remove the equipment
Yeah.
if that's something we
Kinda
wanna
like their
do.
own private park.
I would agree with that also. To get rid of that equipment there.
So I guess just kind of going back to a couple of the bigger things coming up, I would say, Lakeside Memorial Park, figuring out how we want to move forward with that equipment. I can talk to our contractor to see if there's, what it would take to get a bid on just removing it and putting it back. I know in our preliminary conversations on that, part of it would be dependent on if there's any damages as they're removing it. So, I can get an idea though of what that cost might be in the surfacing, unless someone feels strongly about pursuing new equipment there.
I
I
feel
know.
like we have to take it out. Might as well move it somewhere else.
I
And
agree.
get our better equipment at that location. And I mean, I'd love to work with Theme Concepts again. I know we had an Eagle,
It failed miserably, failed the test.
right, possibility, and I know that they've been looking at other options, but, something we can look at possibly working with them. That might be, our Dragon Park has been very successful in that area, so something that might be usable.
But something we don't have at Lakeside is a lot of area. I think we need to have something that is, I don't want to say plastic, but something that goes back in the corner and you can still enjoy the lake and the kids can enjoy the playground equipment.
Compact.
I think you need something that you sort of kind of get the most bang for your buck. And my personal opinion about making that a themed concept in that particular area, when I have my grandkids at the Dragon, it's limited on how many kids can play on that at one time. So that would be the problem that I would see unless they came up with something fantastic that handled 20 kids at one time. I haven't seen that, but if that would happen, maybe that would be a possibility. But I think it's important that because it's such a big, greatly used park, that the more kids that we can accommodate with fun stuff, the better.
Yep.
Perfect.
I will say, I recently saw a landscape structures new playground in small town North Dakota, which I was very surprised to see it there. And, in my position, I was like, whoa, this is amazing, and they did a really good layout with it. I know one thing that's been talked about is like one of those zip lines, and they had one, and I, of course, tried it multiple times. It was really fun. And like, I've heard that at a lot of community parks that have that, kids wait like in a line of 15, 20 kids for this zip line. So, I think that's something we should consider when, maybe at Lakeside, or if we talk about the Belts Park redevelopment. That was a fun feature, and I think they had a very nice layout. They had, something that was for the 2 to 5 year olds and the 5 to 12 year olds. And I think that we don't see that so much right now at Lakeside Memorial Park. And I think having that mix like Belts Park, where you have something that your littler kids can play on with, you know, something bigger for the 5 to 12-year-olds is a nice feature, because then there's something for everybody for that. So I know with all the developments going on downtown as well, I think the park's going to continue to be heavily utilized, if not even more, and be more of an attraction. So I think that's something to really think about on how we want to spend our dollars. We do have over, I think, about $250,000 for park development currently. So, you know, if we're looking at new equipment at Lakeside Memorial Park, you're going to be talking in that $100,000, potentially that $100,000 range to do a really big playground set. So I think maybe just think about that, if that's the direction we want to go and spend that kind of money, and then think of, if that's the case, where would we consider putting the current equipment. I think that's just a big discussion and decision to make in the near future.
And the current piece would have expense to have it retrofitted.
A little bit of an expense. I think pretty much they would, you know, just to fix some of the parts that have shifted and get it back to where being level. They pretty much expressed mostly some poles might be damaged a little bit. So nothing extensive, but I'll revisit that conversation and see if there's any way they can give me any monetary amount on what they would think it would cost to do that relocate option and keep moving that discussion forward.
A place I would like to see it relocated to is possibly that Shady Trails in Forest Lake. It's a pretty heavily dense area in our community that is open to a park area right now, so.
Is that the one that's kind of in between two roads?
Yes.
Okay.
Like it should be a road. I mean, at one point it should have been.
Right,
or
it was
or
planned
something.
to, and never fulfilled to that, yes.
So, and I think, you know, other than that, just continuing to think about, we don't have to make any, you know, major revelations tonight, but also the Belts Park redevelopment, to what extent, you know, out of that presentation we received where they talked about, you know, a skate park and tetherball and, you know, maybe adding or improving volleyball courts and resurfacing the basketball courts. I know that's a popular request. The tennis courts are currently cracked and obviously there's not as much use there. Another request recently for lights at the tennis court. I guess 10 years ago the lights worked there, and in time with the transition of people and whatnot, they have never been repaired, but I don't think anyone's ever asked of that until recently. I guess there's a switch on the light post. So, you know, getting that operating again, that was some history we learned, but it's been about 10 years, I believe, since that's been working. So just,
Don't we have light posts in storage somewhere? I mean, in the event that it needed one, because I think they're in storage for Fenway, but I don't know if you could still match them. They've been in storage that long?
I think the fixtures
They're just the
are in
fixtures.
storage or at
And-
the airport hangar.
Okay.
And the fixtures are, it sounded like they wanted to do more of the LEDs, and those aren't LED compatible, I think.
Probably not anymore.
One of the things I would like to mention, just kind of being at the ice rink, our new ice rinks today, maybe possibly looking at some new ice rink nets. I don't know if you'll need new, I don't know what you would call them.
So Dave Adams and I recently talked about that within the last week or so, and we might have an opportunity for some nice used ones as well. So we're looking at that, but we agree that that would be something on that list of things to improve or purchase yet this year with the budget we have remaining. So I agree, those are pretty worn down. So I'll follow up with Dave to see if we can get some information by next Tuesday on what that cost might be.
One thing that we'll want to look at possibly approving next week, Tuesday, is where we would want to put those Lions Club dollars. Can you just give us an update on how much they gave us and what you kind of were talking about?
Right, so the reminder, and for new members, the Forest Lake Lions did provide a contribution to Parks Department for $7,500 to be used towards park equipment. That's still pending as to what that might be. We could certainly discuss and come up with a smaller piece or area where that we can purchase something, maybe in conjunction with a grant. There's grant opportunities coming up here through November for playground equipment. Or one consideration was with the cost that we had for the Cedar Park Pavilion and additional costs for installation, would that be a good opportunity to present that to the Forest Lake Lions and actually make it happen that they have their logo and they basically are sponsored the pavilion at Cedar Park and put that emblem on there? I know in our discussion about this, I know they wanted a park that maybe be renamed Lions Park, and I don't know if that is even an option or a consideration for Cedar. But there's also an opportunity for, I know that it's got new equipment, but they can continue to have that be their park and maybe contribute to the parking lot improvements next year and then something else the following year if they're interested in that. So that's something that we need to confirm and finalize as well. And that was just one idea we had.
It makes actually an idea of what Terry said was a handicapped ride or something that might be
For sure.
And so at Cedar Park, there's certainly additional green space. And you have the current container where the playground equipment exists. I do agree with Jackie that the Dragon is popular, but it's limited in use. So I think that there would be potential to expand that out more if you adjust this, add a larger perimeter or do something, additional there for the park if we wanted to go that route. But something accessible would be nice.
For sure. All right. Any other questions or
I just had one more on the
recommendations?
establish fall protection at parks. Likely we'll need to, in the spring, top off some of the other parks. And as we had decided, let's just use Fenway as an example, remove the rubber mulch from one park, use that to top off at other parks, and then put the engineered wood fiber chips at Fenway moving forward. So I think just starting to think about what priority, or do we have a priority in what parks we get rid of the rubber mulch and use it dispersed in other parks, because we'll probably want to consider that either later this year or first thing in the spring, so we have rubber mulch available to top off at other parks.
Perfect. All right. Any other discussion? Here, none. All right. Next will be our arts in the park entertainment.
Okay, so we can, at our meeting next Tuesday, I will have a document put together, just being that we had the workshop tonight, just for discussion and open conversation. Start really thinking about arts in the park or entertainment for next year. We've contracted with Woody McBride for the past 3 years now, so this season will be number 4. He emailed me late on Friday that his ask for $3,600 would be the same again next year, and he did put together a very high level draft of a recommendation on what performers to include. So I guess my question for Parks Commission is, what information would you be interested in other than knowing like the band name and a link to their site, to help make a decision and be more involved in that process? Do we want to continue contracting with Woody McBride, or is it something that you'd prefer to have the city be responsible for moving forward? So that's something that we'll want to start looking at in greater detail next Tuesday. But he has provided a draft, and I guess personally, I'm not in the music industry, so I'd have to go and ask for references or understand where they've played. And I think that conversation came up last year. How do we know they're good, or where have they been performing at, and have they been well received? So I think last year overall everything went smoothly. There was 1 or 2 nights where I heard some feedback where it wasn't as popular and maybe not the best fit for our venue.
Let's see. Perfect. One thing to recommend, I would like to, as of right now, our Arts in the Park committee members are Jason DeMoe and Kathy Schulte. And I know Kathy has expressed interest that she might be moving on eventually from our park commission. It would be nice to possibly assign 2 people from our park commission soon, to kind of help Jamie with starting some of this process, working with Woody, deciding if we want to work with this, Woody and his same company, and kind of expanding as we continue to grow, because I think Arts in the Park has grown more and more every single year, and we're gonna start to lose our area of capacity out there. We need to try to find different options out there, so, I don't know if that's something that, can we build a committee in a workshop? I guess we could if we wanted to. Is anyone on the commission interested in that?
I would be interested.
Okay, I would be interested too, so, do you think we should be okay? It's not really a motion to create a committee like that.
No, I don't
so.
think we need a formal motion. I think just a general, that's part of the workshop, and if ever no one has any issues and nobody else really is wanting to take that role, I think
What
that's
else?
fine to just say you guys are happy to help in that area.
Cool. All right, so yeah, going forward, I think, we will, do that, and we'll follow up with Kathy, make sure she, doesn't oppose that at all, so. Perfect, awesome, yeah, I'll be looking forward to that. I got a few ideas. One of them is a trolley. I think we could do a really cool trolley in Forest Lake that you can have stop at 2 or 3 different spots, bring people into the park. And I know a few other places that have done that for big festivals, and it works out great for them, and it's extremely cost effective. So I think that'll attract more people here, and a bunch of other little things we can always look at, so.
Sounds good. And just to kind of wrap up the meeting and just in general, kind of going back to one of Jack's points before of how do we continue conversation and communicating and moving things forward. I will do better at just sending emails out as I have any pieces of information. Like I can send you probably tomorrow. The format I received, the list of recommendations in was not readable. I have to reformat it. So once I get that done, I can just send it over so you guys have plenty of time to look at it on your own time and see, do whatever research you want on the bands or groups. So I'll get that over to you. And then as I have anything else, I'll just start sending over some more emails so you guys can review it and ask me questions or converse amongst yourselves if needed, so.
Perfect. All right. Anything else to talk about tonight? If not, looks like we're going to adjourn. All right. So we will adjourn. Yep, that's it. We don't make a motion to it for a workshop. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks.